Chapter 4. Friday was uneventful. As class ended, a part of Jess wanted to dial Chad's number to see if he was available. The other part of her still remembered the used feeling that enveloped her as he practically chased her from his room Wednesday. No, she might not have much dignity left, but she had enough not to call him this soon. Jess didn't even stop at the front desk to check her mailbox as she entered the dorm. No one wrote to her, and her cell phone bill wasn't due yet. Though she didn't regret living home, she missed having someone to talk to. It wasn't like her mother had really listened in the last few years, but she had still been a warm body to throw words at. Some days, when Jim worked late and Stephanie wasn't around, they had watched movies together or baked cookies like old times. She supposed she could have talked to Emily, but they had nothing in common besides being here on scholarship. No way could Jess tell her about Chad. Anyone who read their Bible and prayed as much as Emily did had no knowledge of lusty desires. With a sigh, Jess stuck her key in the door and turned the knob, waiting for a barrage of questions about her day. But the room lay silent. Emily's bed was made, but empty. Everything on her side of the room sat neatly in its place, as she always left it. But something was off. Jess closed her eyes and pictured Emily's side of the room the way she had last seen it. The picture in her head scanned from left to right, and when it reached Emily's nightstand, Jess's eyes popped open. Yes, there, where her Bible usually sat, was an empty space. Since Jess doubted someone snuck into their room just to steal a Bible, she decided Emily must be off at some religious get-together. As she dropped her bag on the bed, the desire to call Chad flared again. They would have the room to themselves, and if lucky, Emily might return while Chad was here, get offended, and leave for good. Jess pulled her phone out of her pocket and swiped the screen. But as she clicked on the green phone icon, she paused. Calling today would make her appear desperate, and nothing turned a guy off faster than desperation. In fact, the only thing worse than the used, discarded feeling was the feeling of rejection. No, she could wait a few more days to dial his number. Play a little hard to get. She shoved the phone back in her pocket, plopped down on the bed, and punched the power button for the TV remote. The TV hung on the wall, an older model that worked only because the dorm supplied free cable. Jess flicked past the news and the evening game shows, but on a Friday night, not much else was on, unless she wanted to watch reruns of Full House or The Golden Girls, which she didn't. She flicked the TV off. There was always YouTube on her laptop, but Jess didn't feel like watching silly videos either. That left homework. There had been little assigned, being the first week of school, but she needed to catch up on the math class she had skipped. Jess pulled out the book and the syllabus, and after scanning for the missed assignment, she opened the book and tried to focus on the problems. After reading the same problem 3 times, she closed the book and tapped her fingers on the cover. Entertainment. That's what she needed. This was a college town. Surely a club existed near the campus. Pushing the book aside, Jess stood up and grabbed her keys. After shoving her license, a credit card, and a 20 in the pocket of her shorts, she headed out the door, locking it behind her. A mousy brunette with her face shoved in a book manned the information desk on the first floor. Though she looked like she could use it, Jess doubted she had ever stepped foot in a club. But her job was to know crap, so hopefully she had received good training. "Hey," Jess said, tapping the desk to get her attention. The girl's eyes flicked up, but the book remained open, her index finger marking her stopping point. "Are there any local clubs around here that allow under 21s? Her eyebrow inched up her forehead. "You have a phone?" she asked. "Yeah?" "Then Google it." Her attention returned to her book. "Thanks a lot," Jess said, though the words dripped with sarcasm. How that girl still had a job was beyond her. They must be desperate for help. Jess dug her cell phone from her pocket and pulled up a browser. There were 3 clubs listed, but only one allowed underage entrance on Friday nights. The Hangout it was then. After plugging the address into her phone, Jess headed that direction. The Hangout was a large brick building that looked like it had been a warehouse at some point. A large, muscled man with tattoos on his bicep, up his neck, and on his bald head stood at the door. Whether he was or not, he exuded a tough exterior, and with his beefy arms crossed, he looked like a solid wall. "ID, please," he said as she approached. Jess dug in her back pocket and pulled out her license. She no longer had her car, having sold it to have money for college expenses until she could get a job, but her license was still valid, though rarely used now. He perused it, flipped it over, and then handed it back. "It's a $10 cover." Jess nodded and pulled open the solid metal door. Another man, much smaller and wearing Buddy Holly-type glasses, stood behind a counter. She handed a 20 to him, and he slid a $10 bill back, which she shoved in her pocket before scanning the room. The room was large and open, with a bar on the left and a dance floor in the middle, encased by a railing that separated it from the tables around the outside. Few people were on the dance floor yet, as it was relatively early, but the music was blaring, and lights lit up the floor. Jess walked over to the door and ordered a Diet Coke. She lounged on a bar stool while she waited. A few minutes later, a glass slid in front of her, and she sipped it as she watched the few people on the dance floor. A girl with long brown dreads appeared lost in her own world, swaying slightly to the music, while a chunky boy tried to gain the attention of the two blonde girls on the floor. They were adept at ignoring him, turning their back to him whenever he approached, while making it appear they simply wanted to dance to the beat. "You a people watcher?" Jess turned to the bartender, who leaned against the counter, watching her watch the dance floor. "Sometimes," she said with a shrug. "They're all basically the same, though." His brows knit together. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we all put on a show to get people to like us, but then our real colors come out and we just end up hurting each other." He let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a very pessimistic view of the world. You seem a little young to be so jaded." "It is what it is." She finished the drink and pushed it back to him. He had no idea what was in her past, nor did he have the right to judge her. "Have a good night." Suddenly, she didn't want to stay here with the intuitive bartender and the sparse crowd. "Anytime," he hollered as she walked away. "I'm here every weekend." Chad looked at Jess's number in his phone. After the long week, he could use another release, but he wasn't sure he wanted to call her. Though he definitely enjoyed his time with her, he hadn't enjoyed the feelings she brought up in him. He wasn't looking for long-term. Long-term could lead to love, and people you loved died. It was easier not to go near it. No, he didn't need Jess. He needed a ride. Shoving his phone back in his pocket, he grabbed his helmet and headed downstairs. The evening was perfect for a ride, clear and warm. He mounted the Harley and let the engine hum for a minute, enjoying the aggressive vibration of the engine. Then he pulled on his helmet, swung his leg over the bike, and released the brake. The speed limit on campus was slow, but University Avenue loomed ahead, and shortly beyond that, the interstate, where he could ramp up past the speed limit. As he idled at the stoplight, a woman across the street caught his eye. He couldn't see her face, but her short shorts showed off long, lean legs, and her shirt hugged her figure in all the right places. She looked like she enjoyed a good time. When the light turned green, he turned her direction and pulled the bike up the shoulder just behind her. He flipped up his visor. "Care for a ride?" She turned, and his smile froze on his face. It was Jess. What were the odds? A sexy smile lit up her face. "Sure," she said. "I'm always up for a ride." Who was Chad to deny fate? It obviously wanted them together tonight. He reached behind him and grabbed the spare helmet he kept attached to the back of the bike for just such occasions. She took it from him, smoothing her raven locks back as she pulled it on. "I don't have a spare coat," he said. Though the night was warm, the breeze would get chilly as they rode. "That's all right. You can warm me up later." As she swung up behind him and laced her arms around his waist, the scent of some exotic perfume wafted over his shoulder. When he was sure she was secure, he throttled the bike, and they roared off into the setting sun.